The massive observation chamber stretched across 3 levels of the Galactic Council's most secure facility, its crystalline walls humming with energy fields that could analyze warfare footage from 1,000 different worlds. Commander Hyun-woo stepped through the reinforced blast doors, his boots clicking against the metallic floor as holographic displays flickered to life around him. 12 specialized analysis pods rose from the chamber floor like metallic flowers blooming in reverse, each one designed to accommodate the unique physiological needs of different alien species. The morning light from 3 different suns streamed through the chamber's transparent dome, casting rainbow patterns across the assembled team of military analysts. "Another backwater planet seeking protection," muttered analyst Jinae, her silver scales catching the ambient light as she slithered into her serpentine analysis pod. Her species, the Vorthak, had evolved from apex predators on a world where camouflage meant survival, and their natural skepticism had made them excellent military assessors for over 2 centuries. Hyun-woo nodded to each analyst as they settled into their positions. The team represented the galaxy's finest military minds, creatures who had witnessed the rise and fall of countless civilizations, evaluated the combat capabilities of species ranging from hive-minded insectoids to energy-based life forms that existed as pure thought. They had seen plasma weapons that could crack moons, biological warfare that could adapt faster than medical countermeasures, and tactical brilliance that had redefined entire sectors of space. Analyst Subin extended her 4 arms to interface with her pod's neural connections, her translucent blue skin pulsing with bioluminescent patterns that indicated deep concentration. Her aquatic species had evolved in the crushing depths of ocean worlds, developing patience and analytical skills that made them perfect for long-term strategic assessment. "Standard protocol, everyone," Hyun-woo announced, his voice carrying clearly through the chamber's acoustic enhancement system. "We'll review their military development chronologically and assess threat levels accordingly." The central holographic projector descended from the ceiling like a metallic spider, its dozens of lenses and sensors calibrating to display footage that had traveled across light years of space. Earth's diplomatic packet had arrived 3 days ago aboard a primitive fusion drive vessel that looked like a child's toy compared to the sleek antimatter cruisers that normally docked at the station. Min Ho, whose insectoid species had once conquered 17 solar systems before joining the Galactic Council, clicked his mandibles in what passed for amusement among his kind. "I've analyzed the preliminary data. Their fastest warships barely reach 5% of light speed. Their most powerful weapons are crude nuclear devices that we stopped using millennia ago." The other analysts shared knowing glances. It was always the same story with newly discovered species. They desperately wanted the protection that came with Galactic Council membership, but they had little to offer in return except raw materials and perhaps some unique biological compounds. The evaluation process was more of a formality than anything else. Analyst Tae-hyun, whose crystalline body structure allowed him to process multiple data streams simultaneously, resonated with harmonics that translated to mild boredom. "How long until we can recommend them for protected status and move on to more pressing matters? The Andorian border conflicts require our attention." Hyun-woo pulled up the mission briefing on his personal display. Earth's representatives had been unusually specific about their historical documentation, claiming it would provide comprehensive insight into human military evolution. They had warned that some footage might seem intense by galactic standards, but that seemed laughable. The committee had evaluated hundreds of species, from the warrior cultures of the Kethran Empire to the devastating biological warfare capabilities of the Hive collectives. Earth's diplomatic team seemed particularly proud of their military history, Hyun-woo noted, scrolling through the transmission logs. They insisted we review everything chronologically, starting from their earliest recorded conflicts. Jinae's scales shifted to a deeper silver, indicating mild curiosity. Pride in military history usually indicates a warrior culture. That could be useful if they're willing to serve as auxiliary forces in frontier defense. The holographic display activated with a soft chime, displaying the Galactic Council's standard evaluation criteria: threat assessment, technological development, strategic thinking, adaptability, and potential contribution to galactic security. Most species scored poorly in the first 4 categories and relied entirely on the 5th, offering unique resources or strategic planetary positions. As the first images began materializing in the center of the chamber, showing ancient human settlements and what appeared to be primitive farming communities, the analysts leaned forward with casual professional interest. The footage quality was surprisingly good for such a primitive species, though the resolution was still far below galactic standards. "Look at their urban planning," observed Subin, her bioluminescent patterns shifting to indicate analytical focus. Even their earliest civilizations show remarkable organizational capabilities. The committee settled back in their pods, expecting to catalogue simple tribal conflicts and perhaps some interesting siege warfare. After all, how dangerous could a species be when their most advanced spacecraft could barely reach their own planet's moon? None of them realized they were about to witness something that would fundamentally challenge everything they thought they knew about warfare, strategy, and the terrifying potential that lay dormant within seemingly primitive civilizations. The Ars Roman legions materialized in the center of the holographic chamber, like ghosts from humanity's distant past, their bronze armor gleaming under the artificial sunlight of the projection system. Thousands of soldiers moved as one unified organism, their rectangular shields connecting in perfect geometric patterns that created an impenetrable wall of wood and metal. Analyst Subin's 4 arms danced across her control interface as she zoomed in on the formation. Her aquatic species had evolved in environments where group coordination meant survival, but what she observed defied her understanding of primitive military organization. "Fascinating organizational structure for such a primitive species," she noted, her bioluminescent patterns shifting to deep blue as she recorded observations on her crystalline data pad. The Testudo Formation advanced across ancient battlefields, while arrows bounced harmlessly off the interlocked shields above their heads. Each soldier knew exactly where to position himself, when to move, and how to maintain the formation's integrity even under intense enemy fire. It was like watching a living machine built from individual components who had somehow learned to think as one. Ginny's silver scales rippled with intrigue as she observed the tactical precision. Her own species had required advanced neural implants to achieve such coordination, yet these humans were accomplishing it through pure training and discipline. "Look at their communication system," she hissed through her translator. "No technological enhancement, just vocal commands and horn signals. Yet they maintain formation cohesion across massive battlefield distances." As the footage progressed through centuries of human conflict, the committee's casual interest transformed into something approaching fascination. Medieval siege warfare unfolded before them like a masterclass in engineering innovation. Massive catapults hurled stones the size of spacecraft components against castle walls, while engineers calculated trajectories using nothing more than mathematical principles and practical experience. The siege of Constantinople played out in dramatic detail, showing humans constructing enormous cannons that could breach walls that had stood for over 1,000 years. Minho's compound eyes tracked the logistics chains that supported these massive military operations, the coordination of resources, the planning that went into moving armies across continents, the systematic approach to breaking down seemingly impregnable defenses. "They're treating warfare like a science," Minho observed, his mandibles clicking with what his species considered deep thought. "Each campaign builds upon lessons learned from previous conflicts. The Napoleonic campaigns revealed strategic thinking that made several analysts sit up straighter in their pods. The holographic display showed armies moving across Europe like pieces on a cosmic chessboard, with supply lines stretching across multiple countries and coordination between different military branches that rivaled modern galactic fleet operations. Tai Hyun's crystalline body resonated with frequencies that indicated genuine surprise. "Commander, their logistical capabilities are remarkable for a pre-space civilization. They're moving hundreds of thousands of soldiers across vast distances while maintaining supply chains that would challenge some of our current member species." But it was the emotional intensity of human warfare that truly unsettled the observers. Minho, whose warrior species had evolved beyond emotional attachment to combat, shifted uncomfortably as he watched footage of human cavalry charges. Soldiers threw themselves into battle with a fervor that seemed to transcend mere survival instinct, fighting not just for territory or resources, but for abstract concepts that had no material value. "They fight with emotional intensity we rarely see in civilized warfare," he observed, his voice carrying undertones of both admiration and unease. "Look how they throw themselves into battle for abstract concepts like honor and homeland. They're willing to die for ideas rather than just survival." The holographic display showed human soldiers charging into certain death, not because they were forced to, but because they believed in something greater than themselves. It was a level of commitment that most galactic species had abandoned as inefficient and irrational. When the Mongol conquest footage began, the atmosphere in the chamber changed completely. The committee watched in growing silence as disciplined horsemen swept across continents like a natural disaster, given military organization. These weren't random raiders. They were a military machine that adapted its tactics to each new enemy and terrain with terrifying efficiency. The Mongols defeated Chinese fortifications using Chinese siege techniques, then turned around and used completely different strategies against European knights. They absorbed the best military innovations from every culture they encountered, creating a constantly evolving war machine that seemed unstoppable. Analysts Ye Jun and So Young, both from species that had never developed beyond defensive warfare, began showing signs of severe psychological distress. Ye Jun's tentacles wrapped around himself in a protective gesture, while So Young's energy field flickered with patterns that indicated panic among her kind. "This isn't primitive warfare," So Young whispered to Hyun-woo, her voice barely registering through the translation matrix. "They're innovating faster than most species develop basic agriculture. Each generation of human warriors is more sophisticated than the last." The footage showed Mongol armies coordinating attacks across thousands of miles simultaneously, using communication systems that relied on riders and signal fires to maintain strategic coherence across an empire that spanned continents. Their adaptability was frightening. They learned from every enemy they faced and incorporated those lessons into their own military doctrine. Hyun-woo watched his team's reactions with growing concern. These were experienced military analysts who had evaluated hundreds of civilizations, yet something about human warfare was affecting them in ways he had never seen before. The casual confidence they had shown at the beginning of the evaluation was evaporating, as they realized they might be looking at something entirely unprecedented in galactic military history. The holographic display flickered as it transitioned from medieval warfare to something that made the entire chamber fall silent. Grainy black and white images materialized, showing vast networks of trenches stretching across scarred landscapes that looked like the surface of dead planets. Steam and smoke rose from craters that pockmarked the Earth between opposing armies, while strange metal contraptions rolled across the battlefield on tracks like primitive land-based spacecraft. The first human soldiers appeared, climbing from their underground positions with weapons that fired continuously rather than single shots. The committee watched in growing horror as these men ran directly into streams of bullets that cut them down by the hundreds. Yet more kept coming, wave after wave, as if death itself had become just another obstacle to overcome. They mechanized. "Death itself," breathed analyst Tae-hyun, his crystalline body resonating with frequencies that indicated deep distress. His forearms trembled as he manipulated his control interface, trying to process what he was witnessing. The systematic nature of the killing was unlike anything in the galactic military database. Chemical weapon attacks filled the display with clouds of poison gas that drifted across battlefields, like the toxic atmospheres of forbidden worlds. Humans wore primitive breathing apparatus that resembled the environmental suits used on hostile planets. Yet they continued fighting, even when their own air had become deadly. The weapons didn't just kill, they tortured, creating suffering on a scale that most civilized species had never conceived. Subin's bioluminescent patterns shifted to colors that had no translation in any known language, indicating emotional states her species had never needed to develop words for. "Commander, they're using their own planet's chemistry against themselves. This isn't warfare, it's planetary suicide with military organization. The scale of mobilization revealed itself as the footage progressed. Entire continents had been transformed into war machines, with civilian populations working in massive factories that produced nothing but instruments of destruction. The humans had turned their entire industrial capacity toward killing other humans, with an efficiency that rivaled the greatest manufacturing worlds in the galaxy. Minho's compound eyes tracked the logistics networks that supported this mechanized slaughter. Supply lines stretched across oceans, using primitive but effective transportation systems. Millions of humans had been organized into armies that moved with the coordination of space fleets. Yet these people had never even left their own planet's atmosphere. Look at their resource allocation, he clicked through his translator, his voice carrying undertones of professional admiration mixed with horror. They've converted their entire planetary economy to support warfare. This level of total mobilization would strain most galactic civilizations. The transition to World War II documentation created an immediate shift in the chamber's atmosphere. What had been horror became something approaching panic among the observing analysts. The footage showed human technology advancing at rates that seemed impossible. Within decades, they had progressed from simple chemical weapons to aircraft that could devastate entire cities. Strategic bombing campaigns played out across the holographic display like scenes from the destruction of worlds during the ancient galactic wars. Cities that had stood for centuries vanished in firestorms that reached temperatures found only in stellar cores. Yet somehow the humans continued fighting, even as their own civilization burned around them. Ji-Woo, whose pacifist species had evolved beyond physical conflict millions of years ago, began showing signs of severe psychological breakdown. Her energy field fluctuated wildly as footage of concentration camps filled the display. The systematic nature of the genocide, the industrial approach to extermination, the careful documentation of mass murder, it was more than her peaceful mind could process. This is not warfare, she whispered through her translator before her energy form destabilized completely. Emergency medical systems activated as she fled the chamber, her species' first recorded case of psychological trauma in over 10,000 years. The Holocaust documentation continued playing automatically, showing human cruelty systematized to levels that exceeded the worst atrocities in galactic history. Yet interwoven with these scenes of horror were acts of heroism that defied logical explanation. Humans risking their lives to save strangers, sacrificing themselves for principles, maintaining hope in circumstances that should have destroyed all will to live. Analysts Sungmin and Yoon-jung submitted immediate resignation requests before the atomic weapons demonstration even began. Sungmin's tentacles had wrapped so tightly around himself that medical intervention was required to separate them, while Yoon-jung's scales had turned completely black, a stress response her species exhibited only when facing extinction-level threats. "Commander," Yoon-jung's voice shook as she gathered her belongings with trembling hands. "My species has never encountered anything like this. They don't just wage war, they perfect it, systematize it, then somehow maintain the capacity for incredible acts of heroism within the same conflicts." The atomic bomb footage played to a chamber that had lost half its occupants. The mushroom clouds rising over human cities looked like miniature stellar explosions, yet these weapons had been created and used by the same species that had produced art, music, and literature throughout their conflicts. The contradiction was more disturbing than the destruction itself. Yunwoo studied the remaining footage timestamps with growing dread, his hands shaking as he realized they were only halfway through human military history. If industrial age warfare had broken half his team, what would modern conflicts do to the survivors? The chamber felt considerably emptier as only 6 analysts remained, their faces reflecting a mixture of professional fascination and deep psychological discomfort that threatened to overcome their training entirely. The holographic display shifted to dense jungle environments that looked like the hostile bioworlds in the outer rim sectors. Vietnam warfare unfolded before the remaining analysts like a masterclass in adaptive combat, showing humans learning to fight in conditions that would challenge even the most experienced galactic marines. The thick canopy blocked out sunlight, just like the Predator worlds, where Council forces had struggled for decades to maintain control. American soldiers moved through the vegetation with equipment that seemed primitive by galactic standards, yet their tactical adaptation was remarkable. They had learned to use the jungle's sounds to mask their movements, to read the subtle signs of enemy presence, and to turn the hostile environment into an ally rather than an obstacle. "They learn from every defeat," noted analyst Hyojin, her voice barely above a whisper as her serpentine form coiled tighter around her observation post. Her species had evolved in similar jungle environments, yet even they had never developed such sophisticated woodland combat techniques. Each conflict teaches them new methods of destruction. The footage showed human forces adapting to guerrilla tactics with disturbing efficiency. When their enemies used tunnel networks, humans developed new detection methods and specialized weapons for underground combat. When ambush tactics proved effective against them, they created counter-ambush strategies that turned the hunters into the hunted. It was like watching a military organism evolve in real time. Helicopter gunships swept across the holographic jungle like metallic predators, their rotors creating downwash that bent trees and scattered debris. These primitive aircraft moved with coordination that rivaled advanced anti-gravity fighters, providing close air support to ground troops with precision that impressed even the technology-advanced observers. The psychological warfare elements proved particularly unsettling. Humans had learned to use sound itself as a weapon, broadcasting messages that could demoralize entire enemy units. They dropped leaflets from aircraft like information bombs, turning propaganda into ammunition that could destroy fighting spirit. Without firing a shot, Subin's bioluminescent patterns flickered with confusion as she processed the tactical complexity. "Commander, they're fighting multiple wars simultaneously, physical, psychological, and informational. This level of multi-dimensional combat theory exceeds most galactic military doctrine." The transition to Gulf War footage created an immediate shift in the remaining analysts' understanding of human military capability. What they witnessed looked like something from advanced galactic civilizations rather than a planet that had only recently achieved spaceflight. Smart bombs threaded through windows with precision that would challenge the best targeting systems in the galaxy. The holographic display showed missiles following predetermined flight paths, making turns around buildings and striking targets with accuracy measured in centimeters rather than meters. These weapons seemed to think for themselves, adapting to changing conditions during flight. Coordinated airstrikes unfolded like symphonies of destruction, with dozens of aircraft attacking multiple targets simultaneously while avoiding friendly forces and civilian areas. The timing was perfect, the coordination flawless, and the results devastatingly effective. It was military precision on a scale that most species achieved only after centuries of technological development. Minho's compound eyes tracked the communication networks that made such coordination possible. "Look at their information warfare capabilities." He clicked through his translator. "They're using their primitive communication systems more effectively than most species use quantum entanglement networks." The psychological operations footage revealed humans had weaponized information itself. Television broadcasts, radio transmissions, and printed materials had all been turned into instruments of war that could influence enemy decision-making without conventional combat. They had learned to attack minds rather than just bodies. When Special Forces operations footage began, the remaining analysts finally understood what they were truly observing. Night vision raids played out like scenes from elite galactic commando units, showing humans operating in complete darkness with equipment that enhanced their natural senses beyond normal limitations. Counter-terrorism tactics demonstrated human ability to adapt to any enemy, any environment, and any situation. These warriors could fight in urban environments, desert wastelands, Arctic conditions, and deep ocean environments with equal effectiveness. They had turned environmental adaptation into a military art form. The footage showed humans rappelling from aircraft into hostile territory, conducting underwater infiltrations that would challenge amphibious species, and executing precision strikes in crowded civilian areas without harming non-combatants. Their rules of engagement were more sophisticated than most galactic military codes. Analysts Wonshik, Hiejin, and Jae Sung submitted immediate resignations as the implications became clear. Wonshik's energy field fluctuated wildly as he realized. These weren't primitive beings seeking protection. They were apex predators who had turned warfare into an art form that exceeded galactic standards. "I cannot continue this evaluation," Hiejin whispered as she gathered her equipment. "My species has never encountered military thinking this advanced. They've created warfare doctrines that we're still trying to understand." Only Hyunwoo, Subin, and Minho remained in the chamber, staring at footage of humans operating in every conceivable environment with lethal efficiency. The silence was broken only by the hum of recording equipment and the soft clicks of data analysis systems trying to categorize military capabilities that exceeded their programming parameters. "Commander," Subin's scales had paled to almost white. A stress response her aquatic species exhibited only in the presence of apex predators. "They've militarized everything. Weather, economics, communication, even entertainment serves their military development. This species doesn't wage war. They are war given consciousness and creativity." The assessment chamber fell silent, except for the hum of recording equipment capturing humanity's military evolution, while three analysts contemplated the terrifying realization that they might have discovered the most dangerous species in galactic history. Commander Hyunwoo stood alone in the vast assessment chamber, the empty observation pods around him serving as silent monuments to the psychological casualties of the past 5 days. The holographic projectors had finally gone dark after displaying humanity's complete military history, leaving only the soft hum of the station's fusion reactors and the distant whisper of recycled air through the ventilation systems. The resignation. Requests stacked on his crystalline desk told their own story. 9 of the galaxy's most experienced military analysts had been psychologically broken by human warfare documentation. Some had requested immediate transfer to remote research stations in the Outer Rim. Others had applied for early retirement to peaceful agricultural worlds where the concept of organized violence was nothing more than an abstract historical curiosity. Subin and Minho remained at their posts, though both showed visible signs of the strain. Subin's normally vibrant bioluminescent patterns had dimmed to barely perceptible glows, while Minho's compound eyes had developed a permanent twitching that his species exhibited only under extreme stress. They had witnessed something that challenged everything they thought they knew about warfare, civilization, and the relationship between the two. "Final assessment?" Hyunwoo asked, his voice echoing in the chamber that had once buzzed with the chatter of 12 different species discussing routine military evaluations. Subin's forearms moved slowly across her control interface as she compiled her final observations. Her aquatic species had evolved in environments where cooperation meant survival, yet what they had witnessed suggested humans had somehow learned to cooperate in the pursuit of destruction on scales that defied comprehension. "Threat level. Immeasurable," she replied, her translator struggling to convey the emotional undertones in her voice. "But Commander, I recommend immediate alliance rather than containment." The recommendation surprised even Hyunwoo. Standard protocol for species with such advanced military capabilities was immediate quarantine followed by gradual integration under strict supervision. Yet Subin was suggesting the opposite approach: full partnership without the usual safeguards. Minho's mandibles clicked in what his species considered deep contemplation before he spoke. Any species that could develop such military sophistication while simultaneously producing art, music, and literature during their conflicts. They're not just warriors. They're the most dangerous kind of warrior, ones who choose when to fight. The observation hit Hyunwoo like a plasma bolt to the chest. Throughout 5 days of documentation, they had seen humans create beautiful music during their bloodiest wars, write poetry while their cities burned, and maintain hope while facing extinction. The contradiction wasn't a flaw in human nature. It was the source of their strength. Hyunwoo began compiling his report, his hands steady despite the implications of what he was about to recommend to the Galactic Council. The resignation requests would need explanations, The psychological evaluations would require detailed analysis, and the security implications would keep the Council's strategists busy for months. The holographic display activated one final time as he pulled up Earth's current status. Their primitive fusion drive vessels were still docked at the outer station platforms, their crews waiting patiently for a decision that would determine their species' future. Those humans had submitted their military history not as a threat, but as evidence of their readiness to contribute to galactic security. "Look at their current activities," Minho observed, pointing to recent intelligence reports from Earth's solar system. "They're not building weapons of conquest. They're exploring, researching, creating. Their military development was driven by necessity, not aggression." Subin's patterns brightened slightly as she accessed the cultural data that had accompanied Earth's application. "Commander, they've turned their military innovations toward peaceful purposes. Medical technology derived from battlefield medicine. Communication systems developed for warfare, now used for education, transportation advances that started as military logistics." The final report took shape as Hyunwoo synthesized 5 days of observations into recommendations that would reshape galactic military doctrine. The document wouldn't be a simple threat assessment. It would be a complete re-evaluation of how the galaxy understood the relationship between military capability and civilized behavior. His recommendation wouldn't be to deny Earth membership. It would be to fast-track their application with full military partnership privileges, something reserved for only the most trusted allies in galactic history. The final report concluded, "Humanity represents a paradigm shift in galactic military thinking. They have weaponized creativity itself, turning every aspect of their civilization toward potential military application while maintaining remarkable capacity for cooperation and innovation. Recommendation: immediate alliance. The galaxy is safer, with humans as partners than as unknowns." The transmission to the Galactic Council's emergency session went out within hours, accompanied by carefully selected footage highlights and psychological profiles of the analysis team's reactions. The council chambers erupted in discussion as representatives from hundreds of worlds debated the implications of adding such a militarily capable species to their alliance. The vote was unanimous. Earth's membership was approved with full military cooperation privileges, something that typically required decades of probationary status. The secret addendum, classified at the highest levels, noted that humanity was the first species in galactic history to make the cosmos safer by joining the community rather than being conquered by it. As Hyunwoo transmitted the acceptance to Earth's waiting delegation, he couldn't help but smile. The galaxy had spent millennia dealing with threats through superior firepower and technological advantage. Perhaps having humans as allies would finally bring peace to some of the galaxy's more troublesome sectors, not through conquest, but through the kind of creative problem-solving that had turned a single-planet species into the most formidable military force the galaxy had ever encountered. The end.